My mother abandoned me at 16 for her new twins. Now she returns 12 years later demanding money. But when she attacked me at my apartment, police took her away in handcuffs, and she never expected the restraining order. I'm 28 years old, work in digital marketing for a mid-sized company, and honestly never thought I'd get to this point in my life. Like writing about why my own mother now has a restraining order against her, and I'm about to move to a place she can't find. The thing is, all of this started like 12 years ago when I was 16, but actually, if you think about it, it started from the day I was born because my biological father, the guy who technically fathered me, disappeared before I was even a month old. My mom was 20 years old, barely out of her teens, basically, and suddenly she was alone with a baby and no idea what to do. I don't know all the details because she was never very open about that. But what I do know is that my maternal grandparents were the ones who really saved us at that moment. They gave us a place to live, helped with expenses, took care of me when my mom was working or studying or whatever she was doing to try to get ahead. I grew up in my grandparents' house until I was like 7 or 8 years old, I think. And honestly, it wasn't bad at all. They were amazing to me. They took me to the park, helped me with homework, made me feel loved and safe. My mom worked a lot. I remember that perfectly. She was always busy with 2 or 3 different jobs, and I understood it was for me, to give us a better life, or whatever. When I was like 8 years old, maybe a bit older, I don't remember exactly, my mom met Kevin at her work or at some event. It was never clear to me, and they started dating. At first it seemed fine, like Kevin was nice to me, bought me things, played video games with me on weekends, and my mom seemed happy for the first time in a long time. So I was happy too, because if she was good, I was good. You know what I mean? They got married when I was like 12 years old. It was a small wedding in my grandparents' backyard. Nothing fancy, but nice, I guess. And the 3 of us moved into a house they rented in another neighborhood. I remember my mom was super excited about having her own real family, as she used to say, although I always thought we were already a family. But whatever. The first few years with Kevin were normal, let's say. He worked in construction, and my mom continued with her office job. I went to middle school, got good grades, didn't cause problems. I was the typical quiet kid who went unnoticed. Kevin and I weren't super close, but there wasn't conflict either. We simply coexisted in the same house, and that's it. He was more like an adult roommate than a father figure. But I didn't expect anything different because I was already older when he came into my life. Then, when I was 16, my mom got pregnant. And not with 1, but with 2 twins, a boy and a girl. I remember perfectly the day they told me because we were having dinner, something we almost never did all 3 together, and she had this huge smile and said, "We have amazing news. You're going to be a big brother to twins." And I was happy, honestly. Like I thought it was going to be cool to have little siblings. I could teach them things, take care of them, be the responsible older brother I always wanted to be. Kevin looked proud. My mom wouldn't stop talking about names and how she was going to decorate the baby's room, and I was there imagining my new life with 2 little siblings running around the house. But things changed quickly, like within a matter of weeks. My mom started acting different toward me, more distant, colder, and Kevin basically stopped talking to me completely. At first I thought it was pregnancy stress or something like that, hormones and all that stuff, but then the weird conversations started. My mom would ask me things like, "Have you thought about what you're going to do after high school?" Or, "Have you considered looking for a part-time job?" And I was like, "Yeah, Mom, eventually, but I'm still 16 and in school. What are you talking about?" But she kept insisting on that topic, like subtly pressuring me to think about my future outside the house, and I was starting to feel this weird tension in the air, but I didn't want to accept what was obviously happening. One day I came home from school. It was like February or March, still cold, and my mom and Kevin were sitting in the living room waiting for me. And I knew. I literally knew in that moment that something bad was coming because they had those serious faces. You know? Like when someone's going to give you bad news but doesn't know how to start. I sat on the couch in front of them, and my mom didn't even let me take off my backpack before dropping the bomb. She said, "Look, Kevin and I have been talking a lot about the financial situation, and with the twins arriving in a few months, We simply can't keep supporting 3 kids. It's too much for us, and we think you're old enough now to fend for yourself." And I just sat there like, "What? Are you kicking me out?" And she said, "It's not that. We're kicking you out. It's that you need to understand that priorities have changed and the babies are going to need a lot of money and attention, and you're almost an adult already." Kevin didn't say anything that whole time. He just sat there with his arms crossed, looking the other way. And I tried to reason with my mom. Like I said, "But Mom, I'm still in high school. I have like 4 months left until I graduate. Where am I supposed to go?" And she just said, "You can stay with your grandparents. They've always loved you a lot. I'm sure they won't have a problem taking you in." And that was basically it. That was the whole conversation. As if I was being evicted from an apartment and not being expelled from the house where I'd lived the last 4 years with the person who was supposed to care for me, always without conditions. I called my grandparents that same night crying. I couldn't even explain to them properly what had happened because I was too upset. But my grandfather just said, "Come here, right now. Grab what you need and come. And don't ask any questions." I went to them the next day with 2 suitcases of clothes and my school laptop and basically nothing else, because I didn't really have many things that were truly mine. Like most of the furniture and stuff in the room technically belonged to the house. My grandparents received me with open arms, literally. My grandmother hugged me at the door and told me that this was my home now and not to worry about anything, that they were going to take care of me like they always had. My grandfather was furious with my mom. I could see it on his face, even though he tried not to show it in front of me. But I managed to hear when he called my mom later that night and yelled things at her about how she could do that to her own son, how she could be so cruel and selfish. But she just hung up on him. The next 4 months until my graduation, they were weird, like I was living this completely normal life on the surface. I went to school, did my homework, hung out with friends, but inside I was destroyed, you know? I felt this mix of rage and sadness and confusion that I didn't know how to process. Like my own mother had basically told me her new kids were more important than me, that I was expendable, that my existence was a financial problem they needed to eliminate. I didn't go to her baby shower, didn't want to know when the twins were born, didn't respond to the 2 text messages she sent me months later with photos of the babies as if nothing had happened. My grandparents never pressured me to talk to her. They understood I needed space and time. And honestly, I think they were disappointed in her too, although they never said it directly. I graduated from high school with honors. My grandparents went to the ceremony and afterwards took me to dinner at my favorite restaurant, and it was a nice day despite everything. My mom didn't go, didn't even send a congratulations message, and I pretended I didn't care, but honestly it did hurt because, like, your mom is supposed to be there at those important moments, right? But well, I was starting to accept that my mom wasn't the person I thought she was, or maybe she'd always been like that and I just didn't want to see it. I applied to several universities and got a partial scholarship to a state university, like 2 hours from where my grandparents lived, and my aunt, my mom's younger sister, offered to be a co-signer on my student loans to cover what the scholarship didn't pay. She'd always been good to me, like she'd call often to see how I was, invite me to her house on weekends, and when she found out what my mom had done to me, she almost stopped talking to her completely. Basically, my entire family on my mom's side was on my grandparents' and my side. Everyone thought what she'd done was unforgivable, and my mom ended up kind of isolated from the family, which I guess was her problem and not mine. College was tough the first 2 years, I'm not going to lie. I was working part-time at an electronics store to pay for my personal expenses, studying digital marketing because I liked social media and advertising and all that stuff, and basically lived on instant ramen and cheap coffee. My grandparents sent me money when they could, but they weren't swimming in cash either, you know? They were retired people on fixed incomes, so I tried not to ask them for much. But I managed to get through. I graduated in 4 years with a good GPA and got an entry-level job at a digital marketing agency like 3 months after graduating. The salary wasn't amazing. Like I was earning just enough to pay my student loan, rent for a tiny studio, and my basic expenses. But it was my money that I had earned with my effort, and that felt good. It felt like a victory after everything that had happened. During all that time, from 16 until basically 24, I had no contact with my mom. Zero. Nothing. She never really tried to call me, never came looking for me, never apologized or tried to explain her actions. It was as if I had ceased to exist for her the day I left her house, and honestly, I had also made peace with that, like I had accepted that I simply didn't have a mom and that's it. I had moved on with my life without her. My grandparents occasionally mentioned things about her, like that the twins were already in elementary school, or that Kevin had gotten a better job. But I never asked for more details because honestly, I didn't care. Then last year came. I was 27, had been promoted twice at my work, was earning a decent salary for my age. Nothing, millionaire, but definitely comfortable. Had managed to save a bit of money. Had moved to a nicer one-bedroom apartment in a better neighborhood, and things finally felt stable and positive in my life. And just when I thought I'd left all that family drama in the past, my mom appeared. It was a Saturday morning. I was in pajamas drinking coffee and watching something on Netflix when the doorbell rang. I opened the door without thinking much, because I was expecting an Amazon package, and there she was. My mom, standing in the hallway with a huge smile as if we'd just seen each other last week and everything was perfectly normal between us. I was literally frozen, like my brain wasn't processing what I was seeing. And she said, "Hi, honey. Long time no see. You look really good." And I just managed to say, "What are you doing here?" And she was like, "Can I come in? I need to talk to you about something important." I don't know why I let her in. I think it was pure shock or maybe morbid curiosity to know what the hell she wanted after 11 years of total silence. She sat on my couch like nothing, looking around my apartment with that approving face like, "Oh, what a nice place you have. You're doing really well from what I can see." And I was still standing there at the door, not knowing what to do or say. Finally, I closed the door and sat on the other couch, not close to her, and said, "What do you want?" And she sighed dramatically and started with this whole story about how the twins, who were now 11 years old by the way, were super smart and talented and had so much potential, but that Kevin had lost his job a few months ago because of the economy or whatever, and that she was still working but her salary wasn't enough, and that they were worried about how they were going to pay for the twins' college in a few years because you know how education costs are now and blah blah blah. And then she dropped the real reason for her visit. She said, "So I thought of you, and how you've achieved so much in your life, and it fills me with pride to see what you've become, despite everything. And I thought maybe you could help us with a college fund for your siblings. Like contribute something monthly or an initial amount, whatever you can. Because I know you have a good job and earn well." And I just sat there like, "Are you kidding? Did you really just show up after 11 years to ask me for money for the kids you kicked me out of your house for?" But I didn't say anything yet because I was too shocked to formulate coherent words. She kept talking, like saying things about family and how family helps each other, and that I was the older brother and had a responsibility to the twins, and that she knew she'd made mistakes in the past, but that was water under the bridge, and now we needed to focus on the children's future. And when she said, "mistakes in the past," something broke inside me, you know? Like I got up from the couch and told her, "Mistakes in the past? Mom, you kicked me out of your house when I was 16 years old because you decided your new kids were more important than me. It wasn't a mistake. It was a conscious decision you made. And now you come here 11 years later, without having tried to contact me once in all that time, without an apology, without anything, just to ask me for money? Get out of my apartment right now." She got like indignant, completely changed her attitude, and started saying that I was ungrateful, that she had given me life and raised me alone for years when my dad abandoned us, that I owed her something, that the twins were my family, and I couldn't just ignore them, that what were people going to say when they found out I had money and wasn't helping my own family? And I just kept repeating, "Get out of my house, get out of my house," until she finally left, but not before yelling in the hallway that I was a terrible son and that I was going to regret treating her like that. I thought that was the end of it, that she'd understand the message and leave me alone. But oh no, that was just the beginning of a nightmare that lasted months. She started sending me emails, like 3 or 4 a week, with long messages about how I was her only hope, how the twins needed me, how she had sacrificed so much for me when I was a child, and now it was my turn to give back. The emails became more and more aggressive over time. They went from pleas to accusations to veiled threats like, I hope you can live with your conscience knowing you ruined the future of two innocent children. I blocked her email, but she created other accounts, started calling my cell phone from different numbers, left really long voicemails crying and yelling alternately. Then one day she showed up at my work. My work, can you believe it? She arrived at the office reception and told the receptionist she was my mother and needed to see me urgently due to a family emergency. I was in a meeting and they pulled me out because they thought something serious had happened. And when I went down to reception and saw her standing there with that dramatic, worried face, I felt like I was going to explode. I told her to leave immediately, that she wasn't welcome at my workplace, but she started making a scene, like yelling that I was her son, and how could I treat her like that? That she just needed help. Please have compassion. Building security had to intervene and basically escorted her out while she kept yelling things about me and about how family was the most important thing. It was humiliating. My coworkers obviously heard all the commotion. I had to explain to my boss what was happening, and although he was understanding, it was still super awkward and embarrassing. Security ended up calling the police because she refused to leave the parking lot, and the cops told her that if she showed up there again, they could charge her with harassment. She gave them a whole performance about how she was a desperate mother trying to reconnect with her son. And the cops looked at me kind of judgmentally, but they still told her she had to leave. After that, the emails and calls intensified. She started sending messages saying things like, "I talked to your bosses and told them what kind of person you really are," or the twins cry every night asking why their older brother hates them so much, things specifically designed to make me feel guilty or scared. My aunt, the one who co-signed my loans, told me that my mom had also contacted her asking for money and talking bad about me, saying I had promised help and then backed out, which was a complete lie. My aunt, of course, didn't believe her at all and advised me to consider getting a restraining order if this kept escalating. And yes, it kept escalating. She started showing up at my apartment. The first time was like a month after the incident at my work. I got home from grocery shopping, and she was sitting on the floor of the hallway outside my door. She stood up when she saw me and started begging me again, like with her hands together and everything, saying please just listen to her, that she just needed 10 minutes of my time. I told her no, to leave or I'd call the police, and I went into my apartment and closed the door. She stayed out there ringing the doorbell and knocking on the door for like 20 minutes until she finally left, but she came back, again and again. She'd show up at different times, sometimes early in the morning before I went to work, sometimes late at night when I was already in pajamas. It was always the same thing, begging me to talk to her, to give her money, to think of the twins, to remember everything she'd done for me. I called the police several times, but every time they arrived, she was already gone, and they told me that until she did something really illegal, they couldn't do much, that the best thing was for me to seek a restraining order through the court. Then the worst thing happened. It was like 3 weeks ago. I arrived at my apartment after work. It was Friday, and I was exhausted because it had been a super heavy week, and there she was again waiting for me in the hallway. But this time she looked different, like more agitated, more desperate, with messy hair and red eyes as if she'd been crying. As soon as she saw me, she started yelling at me, like saying I was the worst person in the world. How could I deny help to my own family, that Kevin and she were about to lose their house because of me, that the twins were going to end up without an education because of my selfishness. I tried to pass by her to get to my door, but she physically blocked my way, like she stood in front of me with her arms extended, and I told her, "Move, or I'll call the police right now." And she yelled, "Call whoever you want. I'm not leaving until you give me the money you owe me." And I was like, "I don't owe you anything. You threw me out on the street when I was a minor. You abandoned me. And now you want me to support you? You're crazy if you think I'm going to give you a single cent." And that's when she pushed me. She literally put her hands on my chest and pushed me hard against the hallway wall. I was in shock because never, not even when I was a kid, had my mom laid a hand on me that way. She took advantage of my moment of confusion to start grabbing at me, like trying to grab my wallet from my pants pocket, yelling, "Give me the money, give me your card, something, anything." I was trying to get her off me without hurting her, because for some stupid reason, part of me still didn't want to hurt her despite everything. And we were there struggling in the hallway when my neighbor from the apartment next door opened his door. My neighbor, an older man like 60 years old, saw what was happening and yelled, "Hey, leave him alone." and took out his cell phone and called the police immediately. My mom turned to him and yelled at him to mind his own business. But he didn't move. He stayed there at his door with the phone recording the whole scene. She gave me one last push and tried to grab my backpack, but I pushed it away, and she ended up scratching my arm with her nails, left me 3 red lines that bled a little. Then she realized my neighbor was recording and had called the police, and completely changed, started crying and saying, "He's my son. I just want to talk to my son. Why won't he let me see my son?" The police arrived in 10 minutes. My neighbor showed them the video he'd recorded. I showed them the scratches on my arm, told them the whole story of months of harassment, and this time they did arrest my mom. They handcuffed her right there in the hallway while she yelled that I was going to pay for this, that this was all my fault, that the twins were going to be left without a mother because of me. It was surreal seeing her there handcuffed. Part of me felt sorry, but most of me just felt relief that finally this was going to end. The next day, I went to court and requested a restraining order. I submitted all the emails I'd saved, the voicemails, the police report from the incident at my work, my neighbor's video, everything. The judge granted it without much discussion, basically prohibited my mom from contacting me in any way or coming within 500 feet of me, my apartment, or my work for the next 2 years. If she violates the order, she can go to jail. And honestly, I hope that's enough to keep her away because I don't know what else to do. My grandparents found out about all this through my aunt. I hadn't told them before because I didn't want to worry them, but obviously now, they know. My grandmother cried on the phone when I talked to her, saying she never thought her own daughter was capable of all this, that she was so sorry for me. My grandfather just said, "You did the right thing protecting yourself. You don't owe that woman anything." And that made me feel better because, sometimes I still wonder if I'm being too harsh or if I should have tried to help even a little. But then I remember that she threw me out on the street when I was literally a teenager, and all those doubts disappear. I'm in the process of moving now. I'm not going to tell anyone except my grandparents and my aunt where I'm going to be. Not even. My closest friends are going to know my new address at first. I got an apartment in another neighborhood on the other side of the city. I'm going to change my phone number. Basically, I'm going to start over in terms of my personal information. It's annoying and expensive, but it's worth it for my peace of mind. My work is being super understanding about everything. They let me work remotely these last few weeks while I organize everything. And my boss assured me that building security has strict instructions not to let my mom in under any circumstances. I haven't heard anything from her since she was arrested. I don't know if she's in serious legal trouble for the assault. I don't know how she or Kevin or the twins are doing, and honestly, I don't care. I know that sounds cruel. She's my mom and they're my half-siblings, but after everything that happened, I simply don't have emotional capacity to worry about their well-being. I already spent 11 years of my life processing the original abandonment. I'm not going to spend another 11 processing this. My therapist. Because yes, I started going to therapy 2 months ago when all this got really intense. It says that's completely valid and that I have no obligation to maintain relationships with people who hurt me, regardless of blood connection. The thing that bothers me most about this whole situation is that she really believes she has a right to my money, that somehow I owe her something for having given me life, or whatever. As if the first 16 years of basic parental care were a loan, I now have to pay back with interest. And the worst part is, she probably told the twins some distorted version of this story, where I'm the villain who refuses to help his needy family. Those kids probably hate me and don't even know the full truth of what happened. But well, it's not my responsibility to correct my mom's lies. They'll eventually grow up and hopefully someday they can see things more clearly. My grandparents offered to let me stay with them while I look for the new apartment, but I told them I was fine, that I'm grown up and can handle this. The truth is, I don't want to involve them more than necessary because my mom is their daughter despite everything, and I know this is painful for them too, even though they'd never admit it. My grandfather said something last week that stuck with me. He said that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who are supposed to love us unconditionally, and that accepting that is part of becoming an adult. He's right, I guess. So yeah, here I am at 28 years old with a restraining order against my own mother, preparing to move to a secret location as if I'm in a witness protection program, and trying to rebuild the sense of security she destroyed when she showed up a few months ago. Life is weird, honestly. There are days when I feel strong and confident in my decisions, and there are days when I feel guilty and wonder if I'm a bad person for rejecting my family. But then I remember the feeling of standing in that hallway with her, physically attacking me for money, and I know I made the right decision. Nobody deserves to be treated like that, no matter who the person hurting you is.